We've tried many times as an industry to force feed blockchain and wallet adoption and memorizing your seed phrases down people's throats. We know that doesn't work.
I just feel like we're going to get the winners and the losers separated in a big way in the next 1 to 2 years.
You didn't see any of those projects pivot, right? They just basically died on the hill that they wanted to stand on.
Welcome back to the Rollup. We are your hosts. I'm Andy.
I'm Robbie, and this is your home to learn from the biggest guests, the brightest minds at the tip of innovation.
Our goal is to help spread the collective knowledge of everyone in our community.
We are breaking crypto out of its echo chamber and taking it to the real world.
Sit back, relax, and enjoy a quick word from some of our awesome partners who make this show possible. The intersection of AI and crypto is moving fast, and soon an agent will be managing your on-chain transactions for you. But without guardrails, it's a disaster waiting to happen. Newton locks agents to your intent with cryptographic proofs and real penalties if they slip. Learn more at Magic Newton on X. Kenny, we're in New York. I think the last time we did a podcast was in Istanbul.
Yeah.
In 2023.
Yeah, that was the most professional podcast I've ever been on at the time.
Yeah, that was a fun one. Yeah. That was a good conference.
Yeah,
that was like a very good builders or oriented, builders only type vibes.
Yeah, I think there's. What do you think about ECC? Like,
I feel like a lot of people are saying that they're not going, but I think there's going to be a lot of last minute like I'm going.
To be honest, I feel like I might be one of them. Yeah. I've been telling people no.
No,
but now I'm kind of thinking like maybe.
Market's looking good. Like
yeah,
it's the summer, it's the beach.
Yeah,
vibes.
But then also like I don't know, Bitcoin Summit's coming up too, and Bitcoin's looking good too.
Yeah,
so I keep saying no to that, but it's coming in a few weeks.
So you just got back from Dubai as well, right?
Yeah.
So what was the vibe there? What was the takeaways?
Yeah,
what was kind of like the core sectors, ideas? You know, every conference kind of has like a couple like metas, right? Like people are like buzzing about, you said like revenue, right?
Yeah.
Stuff like that. So
yeah, I mean, like I think like the unsurprising topics are pretty sort of consistent over the past few months, right? Like AI, meme coins. But I do think like one of the really emerging topics right now is revenue generation. And I think like it's a good step for the industry, right? Otherwise, the question is how sustainable are projects in the long term? This is something that we're trying to figure out at Manta too, right? Because like, just facing the music, like you got to become a sustainable project. You got to have, a strong team here 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and revenue's the answer.
Yeah. So that was one like major through line. Anything else in Dubai that was particularly compelling for those who weren't able to make it?
A lot of the conversations I had, and I might have been personally biased because I'm trying to figure out how to break that mold into the revenue generation side. So that's really what I was focused on. A lot of the combo. Yeah.
All right, well, then let's break that down then. What is so obviously Manta is a layer 2. It effectively, I think of blockchains as selling block space in some capacity, but there's a different, I think we're starting to see different business models be created around blockchains.
Yeah.
I'm curious what your mental model is for the business model of blockchain broadly. Is it selling block space? Is it like what is the what is the business model of a blockchain?
That's a really good question. Like, I feel like, when Ethereum first came out, right? Like everyone was talking about eliminating the middleman. And the whole vision was supposed to be like, we have decentralized Uber and there's no centralized entity behind it. And so all the money goes to the Uber driver. And then somewhere along the way, we had significantly increasing gas fees.
Yeah, of course.
To the point where, Ethereum became the middleman.
Yeah.
And then we scaled out to L2s. And, like these gas fees, they're great on the revenue generation side. And now we're in a world where, applications are taking transaction fees. And so, we've shifted away from avoiding the middleman to figuring out how to become the middleman. And I think that's the sort of stage that we're in right now. Ultimately, how does this play out 5-10 years from now? I think the blockchain technology-wise will still remain on the infrastructure level. But we're at a point now where we need to prove out product market fit for the infrastructure, right? And so without killer apps, without these new ideas coming out, and without users, the question is, is this technology even useful? Is it even viable, right? Or should we all just revert back to Bitcoin? And so during this experimental phase, I think a lot of the business model is going to shift towards thinking about these product market fit applications that can generate revenue in the short term and the long term. But I think 5-10 years from now, once we have that proven out and people are saying, oh, blockchain technology is the way to go, then we'll see this proliferation on the supply side of applications, and then we can shift back more towards the infrastructure model.
Yeah, so I put out a tweet saying that I think Hyperliquid is basically pushing the needle for the entire industry, where if you're not going to create revenue from some sort of product, obviously that's kind of like an anomaly case, right? Being like one of the biggest perp stexes. And then driving that back to token holders in some meaningful way in the next 1 to 2 years, you're probably not going to be able to like compete, because I think, there's things in time, right, where like path dependencies happen, where it's like, okay, something happens and then it changes the course of, the space. Ethereum, right? Good example.
Yeah.
Stablecoins, right? And so I don't know if Hyperliquid's that, but I think this idea has now been deeply entrenched in the space, that it's like what I had some VCs on, they're looking for this now, that they want to hear about this now. There's no more like, oh, like fuck around and find out, like, you know what I mean? It's not like, oh yeah, we're gonna figure it out, like we're gonna have a token. It's like, no, like what are you doing? And so yeah, I mean, I just see that the space in 1 to 2 years will be like more dominated by this type of thinking. And as you said, I think it's like a maturation and probably highly beneficial.
Yeah.
I just feel like we're gonna get the winners and the losers separated in a big way in the next 1 to 2 years.
Yeah, and what's funny about this is like, I think it's maturity for the industry, not just in the sense of like going towards like a more sustainable model for revenue generation, but also the mindset of the builders in the space.
Yes,
and like like if you go back to the Bitcoin days and you see all of these projects emerging as forks of Bitcoin, right? As soon as the trend became, virtual machines on the blockchain with Ethereum, you didn't see any of those projects pivot, right? They just basically died on the hill that they wanted to stand on.
Yeah.
And then same with like the Ethereum forks, right? Like they all basically died on the hill they stood on. But now, right, we were just having this conversation earlier before this recording, is like all the L2s are looking at, how do I generate revenue, right? Yeah. How do I adapt? And so I think like this mindset shift for projects, for teams, for founders, not just about like, okay, this is the philosophy I'm going to, dig my grave with, but rather, how do I keep this project alive? How do I make it thrive? How do I make it successful? I think that's the sort of mindset we even need in this space, right? Because we have to, I think sometimes we get too philosophical, we get too theoretical, and that gets in the way of broader adoption. Yeah.
And so with that mindset shift, then that you speak of, like more concretely, what does that look like from your perspective with the way that you're approaching Manta then? Be it a year ago, 6 months ago, even to today, like concretely, what is that, in your strategy or kind of like ideas, what is that kind of like materializing to be now?
Yeah. I mean, at the high level, right? Like you can say product market fit. It's obviously easier said than done.
Wait, hold on. Let's just establish, what is the product market fit of blockchain today? Because to me, it's like this, like the cop out is like stable coins and payments and like DeFi and gambling 24/7 kind of like barbell. But like there's a lot more in there, but that's like kind of like the agreed upon consensus product market fit for blockchains.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that?
I totally agree.
Okay.
I think everything is DeFi.
Okay.
Like, and sometimes, I lay in my bed at night wondering like, were the Bitcoin maxis right? Because like, despite all of the innovation, all the sandboxing and all the things that we've tried out, at the end of the day, all people want to do is finance. All they want to do is transact. All they want to do is build more wealth. And like, those are all available with Bitcoin. So maybe Bitcoin maxis are right. Yeah. And like when, we see these experiments in SocialFi and GameFi and all that stuff, but like, my argument is it's like lipstick on a pig, in the sense that at the end of the day, these social experiments are also DeFi products, right? Like I would say that a majority of cases for these experiments, people aren't coming because they're like, oh my God, I love this platform. They're coming because they're like, oh, I'm financially incentivized. And if I post more and if I refer more, then I'm going to get bigger airdrops, which ultimately is a financial incentive, which goes back to DeFi.
Yeah.
Right. So I think right now we're still very much in a realm of DeFi as a core product market fit. And I think there's a lot of opportunity to explore intersections of traditional finance and where the traditional financial value proposition breaks down for democratization and reapply those into crypto. And I think like for projects that are working on that, there's probably way more opportunity in the space than we can imagine right now.
Yeah. And I think a big part of this product market fit conversation is around institutional capital as well, and the institutions coming on chain. Just curious your thoughts as to kind of how that ties into your broader DeFi thesis.
Yeah. I really like the idea of, institutions coming on chain, even just exposure to Bitcoin, right? Because like, a decade ago, I would go to these Bitcoin meetups and honestly, it was all just sketchy people, maybe including myself. Maybe I was one of the sketchy people, but I looked around the room and I'm surrounded by sketchy people. And you didn't really see a clear future there. Whereas now, like people entering this space, they have this fresh view, they have a new perspective, right? Like Bitcoin is no longer, like there's still that sort of taboo about Bitcoin being used for drugs and gambling and money laundering and stuff, but it's a fraction of its identity, 3 years ago, 5 years ago. And so I think like overall, this trend of institutions coming in is great because it gives the whole space a good opportunity for a rebrand. That being said, I think also institutions are definitely not the early adopters. They're not the innovators. They're the laggards. But as they come in, I think there's going to be way more opportunity for the experimenters, for the builders to come up with very clear value propositions, right? Because now you're no longer going after the same pool of users that are maybe like 90% bots, but now you're saying, okay, now there's a big chunk of money over here that Fidelity wants to bring in. How do we capture a piece of that pie? Right. And I think that's going to build a lot more sustainable and future-proof use cases.
Yeah. So I think that's where a lot of revenue will be driven from on-chain as well. I actually just don't think that we have the right idea of institutions. While I agree with your sentiment, I tend to think that they're just sharks and that they just want to come and make money off DeFi. They see inefficiencies in the market. They see ways to make money. They're just going to come in and try to make money.
Sure.
Which is like beneficial for all in a sense. Theoretically, as you grow more liquidity, you grow the pie. That being said, though, that's going to bring it, as you said, a perception change, a liquidity improvement, and also just more proof, kind of like proof in the pudding type of vibe, where it's like, okay, if these guys are doing this, the thesis is validated, and let's keep building this stuff out, right?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of some of the product market fit on that side, but then you got like all the way on the other side, right? So talk to us a bit about kind of how you're thinking about Manta L2s in general, the other side of the product of the product market fit, or the revenue, or the products for that kind of like, user, consumer, like app store, Android user, crypto curious, like very like not in this space, but kind of in the space,
a little adjacent.
Yeah.
Because I think that's touch like the centralized exchanges, but they don't touch on-chain stuff.
Yes, that's like the next big target group, I think. I think we're there. Like we thought we had it last cycle, but I think now it's like we're there.
Yeah, agreed. And I think like, the first part of your question about, just general L2s, right? Like when Manta first launched, we were probably like one of 5 L2s on the market. And it was so clear our product differentiation, right? Especially because we were using Celestia, and within the first month, we already saved users millions of dollars in gas fees, right? The differentiation was clear. Then came proto-dank sharding, then came 500 other L2s, right? And all of a sudden, you're in this ocean of essentially a commoditized technology, right? It's in the world of calderas, right? Like you can spin up an L2 in a matter of seconds, right? And the management is a lot easier, a lot more streamlined. And so I think, this has given a lot of opportunity for a lot of builders in this space to, launch L2s and stuff, which is great. But at the same time, right, that means that from an infrastructure perspective, anyone that's building infrastructure, especially in L2, what's your differentiation?
Yeah.
Right. And so like I give this analogy of like being at a restaurant and you're in a restaurant where there's more waiters than customers, right? And so like, it's just weird. You're sitting at the table and all these waiters are staring at you, That's exactly what it feels like to be a user in the crypto space right now. You got all these L2s and you don't know what the heck's the difference between them. They all have DEXs, they all have lending protocols, but some like twisted parallel universe of them.
Yes.
And so from an L2 perspective, the question is, what is your differentiator? I think if you asked that question 6 months ago, right, or maybe 9 months ago, people would say the technology, right? And then 6 months ago, people would say the community, right? And now I think L2s are struggling to find an answer. And so many are pivoting towards thinking about what sort of apps are, going to be that sort of next big play, because as we're still on this topic of, revenue generation, product market fit, right? Like the hyper liquids of the world are eating everyone's lunch, right? They came out and just like basically blew all the other value propositions out of the water by saying, cold hard cash on the table. What do you have to show, right? And all of our pockets are empty, basically. And so when it comes to like consumer applications, when it comes to sort of these sort of next killer apps, right, that can target the mobile users, that can go beyond Web3. What are those? My personal take, and it's not really industry specific, right? If we go about outside of DeFi, I don't think it's industry specific, but rather workflow specific. I personally think that in order to bring in those, additional users that just simply won't be touching this stuff otherwise, I think you have to start off with centralized. You have to start off with centralized applications that just create a really good user experience that can prove that it can generate revenue. And then from there, once you have that community around it and that revenue generation around it, you retroactively start adding in elements of blockchain. And I think those elements of blockchain that need to be added in should at first be optional, right? Because again, like we've tried many, many times as an industry to force feed blockchain and wallet adoption and memorizing your seed phrases down people's throats. We know that doesn't work. So I think we got to change the game there.
Okay, so start from something like maybe just like a mobile app. With little to no blockchain or crypto rail. Build a funnel, build a distribution, build a, get the validation from the market, and then start to slowly introduce these, these advantages or product benefits that could come with using crypto.
Exactly.
Blockchain rails.
Yeah. Like I think we could probably look in the app store right now and, within 5 minutes, brainstorm like 2-3 ideas for each of the top 20 apps on how they could use crypto.
100%. Yeah, 100%.
And so,
but it's that type of thinking, right? It's not like you're thinking from like the top down almost, if you want to call it that way. Whereas like we've been thinking about it in the space from like, oh, let's start with the infrastructure and then like let's go up. But it's like no, we should just start with like the user, start with the idea and the product, and then like figure out the infrastructure kind of like as we go.
Right.
And it doesn't have to be super decentralized.
Exactly. Yeah.
It doesn't have to be like
developers don't say like, I'm gonna build on AWS. Now, what can I do from here? Right? They say, I want to build this to solve this problem. And after they build it, they can deploy it on AWS. They can deploy it wherever they want. And users don't say, oh, this isn't deployed on Microsoft Azure, I'm not going to use it. Right? They're just like, oh my God, this solves my problem. Now I can learn a second language. Let me use it.
Okay, well then let me throw something at you then.
Yeah.
Is in this lens of thought, do you think that it would be easier for Robinhood to build Solana or an L2 to build Robinhood? Like who would eat whose lunch first in this kind of like, it's kind of like a tangential like question, but you've got these large customer data, just massive trading apps. And then you've got these like super performant L2s and L1s that are like distributed, hard to build, had to raise a lot of money, had to do a lot of things. And so like who would eat whose lunch first, Solana or Robinhood?
Oh my gosh. I think ultimately the answer is it depends, because like there's so many factors going into it. But if I were to be able to choose between starting from Robinhood to build versus starting from, something purely in the Web3 to build, I'd say probably Robinhood.
Yeah.
Because they've got the active users, they've got the community, and these types of levels of adoption are it's not a technological question. It's a user workflow question, right? How do you inject aspects of blockchain in a way that are extremely subtle, that can continue to sort of maintain your user adoption, or at least not drop it off a cliff, and then kind of grow it from there. And the advantage of Robinhood is that Robinhood has way more users than probably the entire crypto space right now. So like they've got that to start with. So I think that's extremely powerful in terms of adoption.
Yeah. Okay. So coming back to the kind of way that we're thinking about building applications in the space with this kind of product first mindset, when you're looking at forms of distribution and the way that you mentioned builders thinking about revenue in a specific way previously versus now. How do you think the tides are shifting with regards to the way that builders either are or should be thinking about distribution and like finding customers and finding users? I do feel like we've had a lot of reliance on, number go up technology, also just kind of like build it, they will come type of energy per se. I think it's shifting bigly, like in a big way now. Just curious, like what you're seeing or how you're thinking about it, or how other builders should be thinking about it. If you have some advice.
Yeah. I mean, I'm very cautious about giving out advice. But, I'll tell you what I'm thinking. And there's a few different ways of doing it. I think one of the most common ways that builders are thinking, especially infrastructure projects, are thinking about this now is, let's build projects. Let's just do it in-house, right? And that's something we're experimenting with as well. But I think those are definitely shots in the dark. And that's because, these are teams that have not built out massively scalable, products that have hundreds of thousands, if not millions of users before. And so, I think confidence is necessary, but there has to be a level of caution as well. And so for us, we're thinking a lot about, okay, what products do we think would be interesting? How do we get them to market very quickly? And how do we test to measure and decide which ones are interesting actually, so that we can double down and, continue down that path? That's one way. It's very common. And it's basically, I think, replacing the grant model, where, it kind of fell apart with grant farming and stuff. I think another opportunity is to look for existing applications and sources of revenue that have customer bases. And, maybe this is a little too edgy right now, but throw your treasury at it.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like, are we going to see some acquisitions of something like obviously not Robinhood scale, but a small app, right? You just buy it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't even know if buying the app is necessary, right? Some of the thoughts that go through my mind, for example, is okay, this company is raising, right? What if, we throw some money in as investors, and then they guarantee some percentage of their revenue for our treasury, and then we can use that revenue for token buybacks or something, and then that would be the start of it, and then we can figure out ways to integrate, our blockchain technology and stuff over time. And that's basically going back to the Robinhood example that we're talking about, right? Because now you've got this user base, and you can subtly transition certain elements of the workflow into blockchain. So I think that's a huge advantage. And on top of that, right, if it's already a revenue generating business, then you can capture market share, you can generate revenue very quickly. So I think that's a really good opportunity also. And straight up acquisition is always a thing too. I think acquisition is just a little bit more of a heavy lift, because now the company itself gets consumed into your own operations.
Yeah, of course.
May affect how it works, right?
Yeah, of course.
But yeah.
So from this lens of thought, then why do you think Coinbase's base L2 has done so well, but Kraken's Inc. has just kind of struggled to get traction? Do you think it's a brand problem? Is it distribution? Is it like, I'm not going to ask you to say anything like negative about like Inc., but like there's a clear...
They're both not Manta, so whatever.
Right. Base is clearly doing well and Inc.'s not, but they're both like very large centralized exchanges with like huge user bases.
Yeah. They are very large centralized exchanges with huge user bases, but at the end of the day, if you were to ask any project, any user, I guess not any, but most, right? Who would they bet their lives on?
Yeah.
I feel like most people would still say Coinbase.
Mm.
And so I think that gives you an answer right there in terms of like, why there's that difference. I mean, like, no offense to Kraken, they definitely wouldn't say Manta, right? They'd say base before Manta. Like, I feel you there, Kraken. But
yeah. But I think, that was going on in my mind as you were explaining these different types of ways to think about distribution, because these centralized exchanges are just massive distribution engines for those chains. Just trying to think like what could be Manta's version of like a centralized exchange, huge user base, or like a company that just consistently brings users and traffic, and like we got to find Manta's, like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
like what is it?
I think that's a really good question, and once you find that answer, let me know.
Yeah. Like, it's like, it could be a company, it could be an app, it could be
I think it's got to be an industry.
An industry, yeah.
Yeah, I think abstract is taking over the content creator industry really well.
Okay, like streaming and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, because once you find your industry, there's so many channels that you can take advantage of, right? Like, let's say, for example, let's say all of a sudden our industry was now media. Right? What do? Next thing I do is I probably go out to all the top sort of news article agencies, maybe starting with crypto, see which ones need fundraising, which ones need grants, which ones need whatever, find how to make these deals with them so that we can get their massive, hundreds of millions of views per month and start injecting, Manta influence into that. Right. And for better or for worse, right? I'm not saying manipulate media, but, at the same time, right? I think like once you find an industry to double down on, there's so many channels in existence that can help you with, that sort of user penetration.
So is that where you think the space is kind of headed from the L2 or even like L1 landscape as a whole, where we start to have like industry specific companies basically?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so because I think ultimately every industry inside and outside of Web3 experiences consolidation, right? So like whether it's the Bitcoin forks or the Ethereum forks, or now the Solana forks, or the Move forks, or the L2s, right? And I think it's very naive or head in the sand of us as a space to say, oh, there's enough space for all of us, and we're all going to kumbaya, because history shows us that's not what happens. Yeah. And so, will it be likely that there is going to be, 20 different media chains that are holding hands and thriving together? Or is it going to be one media chain that eats the big pie and everyone else gets crumbs, or they do other things? Yeah. I think it's definitely going to be the latter.
Yeah. Like, I don't see the general purpose L1, L2. Like, there's going to be a couple, right? And we kind of seen them already. It's like, you got Ethereum, you got Solana, got a couple L2s, a couple L1s that are getting some traffic still. But yeah, I think like going niche specific or like target market specific, trying to figure out who your exact, like who's exactly like the niche, the region, like you got to dial it down somehow. Yeah. Like it can be regional, it can be cultural, it can be, gender, race, sex. Like you just got to start dialing down.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And what's funny about that is the irony is in the Web2 space, that's the first thing you do as a company. Yeah. You find your target audience, right?
Yeah. Like riches are in the niches or whatever. Like, you know what I mean? Yeah.
And everyone in crypto is like, our target audience is 8 billion people.
Yeah. we just threw up these cities without like attractions.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you wouldn't go to a city if there wasn't like something to do. Like you come to New York, you see the Statue of Liberty, you go to Central Park. It's like, okay, there's things to do here. As you're saying, there's a very like copy pasta, like, ecosystems across the board. And you mentioned abstract, we'll see others. I think like those who start to first like move in that direction, kind of swim against the current, will reap the rewards, I think, from the market much quicker, and that's like the next stage.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's just clear.
Yeah.
Like yeah.
Innovating finance, global, institutional, and on-chain. Deep liquidity to drive capital efficiency. Now, maximize yield on institutional-grade liquid staking with METH. Unlock $1 trillion of capital via Bitcoin. All of this secured by Mantle's treasury of billions in stables and ETH capital pools. This entire ecosystem is coordinated by a vast network of seasoned VCs that are aiming to create the next generation of banking and financial technology. This is Mantle.
I think all the momentum's heading that way. And it's kind of reminiscent of maybe like 2-3 years ago when there were so many applications and so many application forks, and then VCs were begging for infrastructure. And then like it became all infrastructure. And now VCs are begging for revenue generation.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to start heading in that path as well.
Yeah. So do you have any thoughts then on the trajectory for the focus of Manta then, with regards to kind of niching down or like builder strategy, or like where do you take Manta from here throughout the rest of the year?
Yeah, it's a really good, complicated question, right? And I wish I had a very succinct answer that could just instill confidence, but the reality is like, you know, we're going back into experimental mode, right? And that's something that I think Manta's always been good at, right? I don't know if you know, but we started out as a Polkadot L1. And, once we realized that that wasn't gaining user traction and we needed to evolve out of that, we went into experimental mode, launched the L2, which was great at that time because, you know, there were 5 of them. And now, you know, there's too many, and we're going back into experimental mode. And so I don't have an exact clear answer right now, but I do know that the team that we have is capable of finding that answer. And I think that, you know, we're honest with ourselves enough that we could probably solve most problems without kind of burying our heads in the sand and pretending everything's okay, because it's not for most L2s right now. But yeah, so product direction, I think naturally going back to the beginning of the conversation, you know, DeFi is a really strong fit. And I think there's so much opportunity to find, exploits in the traditional financial world by democratizing, you know, certain value propositions to, you know, the DeFi space. The Amir right now, right? Like he's working on Thema, and like I think like that's a very interesting opportunity because it's a proven multi-billion-dollar business in TradFi, but that proven multi-billion-dollar business is only accessible to like Goldman and Jane Street and stuff. And so what happens when you try to open it up so that everyone has access to it? And I think that's the golden standard for blockchain, at least like, you know, in Satoshi Nakamoto's white paper, right? Like how do you democratize finance in the sense that, you know, like now, like one of the most recent pieces of news, I think it was Kraken, who now allows you to buy tokenized shares of Apple and stuff, right? Like for us sitting here in our, you know, New York City studio, we take it for granted because we can always open Robinhood and, you know, do that. But like, no one in Indonesia is going to be able to open Robinhood and buy Apple shares, right? And so now they can through Kraken. That's amazing. And so this idea of democratizing finance, I think that has a lot of legs.
Yes. Yeah. I think the stablecoin yield part is really interesting as well. Access to dollars globally, and then access to dollar-based yields globally. So like I just think like that general trend, you're spot on. Like the further democratization of these basically financial tools that have been, you know, kind of with the Western world, but then also within like the Western world corporations. You know, we don't really see it here, as you say, but you go to Brazil, you go to Turkey, you go to these places, Indonesia, and you see it still.
Yeah. And also like, you know, a really simple idea that I'm surprised doesn't have much traction right now. Because you mentioned yield, right? And like, you know, US Treasury yield is like the gold standard of risk-free rate. But now we're also seeing macroeconomically, the US dollar is not as strong as it used to be. And there are other contenders, and, you know, something like BRICS something like CNY, right? Like, why aren't there stable versions of that on chain?
Yeah. Well, there are. They just haven't got much traction.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
Huh.
There's like euros and
Yeah, definitely euros. Yeah.
that there may be CNY or like there's like small ones, yeah. But you have to like find LPs. Like who's gonna provide liquidity to that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. But I'm surprised because like this model has proven to be so fruitful,
$4, right?
Profitable for USDT. Yeah. It's like, what if we do that? It's like everyone is now saying, what if we do MicroStrategy but for Solana? What if we do MicroStrategy but for Ethereum? Right?
Yeah,
like,
there's a little bit of a lack of creative thought there.
Sure, but at the same time, it's like, why don't we do stable coins but for this other currency?
Yeah. Kenny, the USD bear here.
No comment. I mean, just hedging, right?
All right, a bit of a curveball question for you.
Yeah.
So Hyperliquid hit about $8-9 billion of open interest, I think yesterday, 2 days ago. If you were CZ watching this happen right now, what would you do?
I think you tweeted that, right?
I did. I did.
Oh boy.
And you were just on a panel with CZ or something in Dubai, weren't you? Or you guys?
Oh no.
You guys were.
I mean, yeah, I was in the area with him.
Yeah. Gotcha.
I don't know if he knows I exist. I know he exists.
Yeah, fair
CZ. Hi. Oh boy, if I was CZ in that situation.
Or even perhaps like, how do you potentially see this battle between the core theme that again that Hyperliquid's pushing and that Uniswap has pushed is just DEX dominance. Like DEX dominance is just skyrocketing in terms of spot and now because Hyperliquid in terms of perps versus centralized exchanges. So like, how do you see this playing out? Maybe that's a better way to ask the question instead of like, you're gonna go tell the regulators, and North
Get them to knock on the door.
Yeah. But perhaps, so DEX dominance keeps rising. This happens like, do we get price discovery on chain? Do we surpass centralized exchanges? Like, how do you see this playing out? Maybe like 2-3 year time horizon?
Yeah. I think time horizon definitely matters here because like in the short term, right, like 1 to 2 years, I would say it's probably not something to worry about because like, if you simply look at the market share of on-chain users versus the market share of centralized exchange traders, right? Like it's on-chain users is like a drop in the bucket, right? Because everyone can use a SEX, but not everyone's going to want to do their own wallet and all that stuff, right? But then, 2 to 3 years down the line, when you're thinking more about abstraction and bringing on users, right? Like it's not a permanent sort of bottleneck. It's just a little hurdle that you have to go through. And then I think in that case, right, we're going to see a lot more proliferation of on-chain activity because from a security perspective, it just makes a lot more sense. Like if I'm a user and I can fully self-custody my funds because we have a history of exchanges, doing funky things with our funds, that's great. And then we have a history of exchanges being hacked. And when a centralized exchange is hacked, every single user's funds gone, right?
But do you really think that's good enough reason though? Like, wouldn't the reason more be like, or another potential reason be there's just really good products on chain?
I mean, I think the product question's different because, if you're looking for trading activity, right? Like I don't think most traders care about the product. I think traders care about how much money they can make from the token. And so as long as the revenue or the token profitability potential is there, then, right, like I think it's going to be much more interesting for people to go on chain. And especially, I mean, we see this trend now, right? Like projects, they start off just launching on DEXs. And then they go into centralized exchanges because centralized exchanges right now, it's a process, right? Like, and for better or for worse, right? Because the process also requires a lot of due diligence, which, hopefully most of the time means that, sketchy things get weeded out. But at the same time, right, like it means the process is long. It means the process is expensive. And so, like for smaller projects that have good community, good traction, would it be easier for them to just straight up launch on a DEX first? I think it would be. Yeah. So like, I think naturally in the future, right, like if given the option to launch now and launch free, versus, you know, extended periods of time, more regulation and all that other stuff, right? You'll probably see more of the supply, the token opportunities appear on dexes before sexes. And so that supply, depending on, you know, how much opportunity that presents to the users, the demand side, then I think you'll see more of a flow of demand. And right now the demand is bottlenecked by the simple atrocity of Web3.
Of shitcoins, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Right. So, I mean, but that you know, jar of worms has been opened. Like, you know, we've had on-chain runners to a bill. We've had, you know, airdrops. Like all that stuff has happened.
Yeah.
Just like, what's the next iteration that just like pushes more people off? I think it's a UX problem. I mean, you said security, right? In terms of like being a benefit for being on-chain, but that also comes with just like, you know.
You're right. Because security is it's a retroactive response, right? Like most people are not coming on day one and be like, what's the security like, right?
No.
They're just saying, what can I trade?
But
and then when it happens, they're like, oh, my security.
Exactly. Yeah. It matters till it does. Like, it doesn't matter until it does, type of thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
but I mean, for exchanges, right? I think like exchanges are recognizing this, and I think they're also building a lot of stopgaps to, you know, hedge against it as well, right? Like Binance has got Pancake and they've got BNB Chain, both of which I think are doing really well.
Yeah.
And Coinbase has got Base, which is doing really well. And Kraken, good luck. I'm sure.
Feel you, Kraken. We love you.
Just kidding. But yeah, so I mean, like every exchange is doing it, right? Bybit's got Mantle. BitGet's got Morph. So like I think like these exchanges are definitely aware and putting in like some backup plans.
Kind of coming to a wrap here, Kenny. What's any crazy predictions for this year, or any? Have you been spending much time doing like using AI tools, or like?
Oh yeah.
Okay, tell us about that.
Just AI tools in general.
Yeah.
Okay, so our entire team is switching over to AI. Like we're getting team subscriptions for every single member, and you know, not just ChatGPT. We're getting everyone into vibe coding. And because like we want people to start thinking more from like a product perspective, because that's our number one initiative, right? Like we need product market fit. And so, you know, everyone from our BD team to our marketing team to our engineers, right? Like everyone's going into vibe coding. And like surprisingly, it's pretty easy once you get the hang of it. And there's like tools for all different levels of people. So yeah, we've definitely been getting into AI and using that to sort of streamline our process, because at the end of the day, we don't know what products are going to work. And so our thesis is we got to try out everything and do it as quickly as we can, from zero to MVP, from idea to MVP. And the fastest way to do that right now is vibe coding. Yeah,
I've tried it a bit, but I need to spend more time on it as well. But I use LMs daily now. It's pretty sweet.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's like, I don't know if you use like local LLMs, but like I've been just downloading those on my computer, and I swear I have a team of people with me when I'm on an airplane or something without Wi-Fi. And like I'm just like, okay, I need a new HR process in place for, you know, when someone is offboarding or onboarding or something. And I just ask the AI and they just give it to me in seconds, right?
Yeah,
and it's like crazy. Probably 90 to 95% of the quality you would get from like the latest model of ChatGPT or Claude.
Yeah.
And I think it's gonna really blow up when these local LLMs can run on your phones.
Yeah,
that's gonna be a game changer.
Yeah,
because like then it's 24/7 access everywhere. Yeah.
Kenny, thanks for coming out, man. It's been a great conversation.
Thanks for having me. It's always great. Yeah. Thanks, Andy.
It's been a year and a half since our last one. We'll try to do another one in a shorter time period.
Yeah. Hopefully, you know, we'll talk about how Manta's evolved since then.
That's right.
Yeah.
Alrighty, man. Thank you.
Cool. Cheers, guys.